And then slope is the other thing that really affects our Ecoroof design. And slope is the angle of the pitch of the horizontal plane. So you hear 412 is thrown out for a roof pitch, 10%, 2%, and all of those are slopes of a roof. And the Ecoroofs in general range from flat roofs to, they can range from fairly steeply pitched roofs. You've probably seen some of those grass-covered roofs, maybe in Germany or Sweden, that are fairly steep. But in general, 2 to 10% is kind of the good rule of thumb for north and east aspects. And then 2% is good for south and west, because what we don't want to do is increase that slope of that roof to, if it faces south, to increase that heat gain. So does that make sense? Because that sun comes in at an angle, and the more you tilt that plane to the perpendicular of that of the sun, then the more heat gain you're going to get. So if you have your choice, south and west aspects, keep it fairly flat. You can pitch it on the other slopes, or plant a tree, or have it cut out and do that.
What's the steepest roof you've seen with an Ecoroof?
Yeah. Well, we'll show you in just a second. But slope does have an effect on the architecture, just the aesthetics of a building. So that needs to be appreciated when you're talking about slope. But the statement is that the flat roof is a really efficient design, and therefore it doesn't take many additional materials. But if you're doing a pitched roof, here, you're going to have to do trusses and a lot more material to create that peak. In a residential application, that's more common than you have in kind of just a 10,000 square foot box building that we might have in downtown Portland. But here's a good example of just what can be done. This is, I don't know what that 60% slope. What do you guys think? Yeah. Yep. I guess it's steep. We'll just say that. And now you can't just do this, and we'll talk a little bit, but you can't just do that and hope that it's going to stick. So here's a good example of the Orpanella residence, where there is a new building that was constructed and Ecoroof placed on top of it. And in order to hold that soil on that slope, they just did a fairly simple batten system here that not only supports, it's connected horizontally here at these points, but then also supports kind of in this vertical direction as well. And so it's just this whole trellis structure. So when you place that soil down, the only movement that you might get is really consolidated to maybe a 6 by 6 square that needs to hold itself, rather than the entire roof bearing down on itself. And so this is a fairly simple structure, membrane placed down, and then this trellis structure, batten structure on top, and then here's the soil and plant material going in there. And see, look at those happy Ecoroof people. You can't help but keep smiling the whole time you're doing that. That's just good stuff.
Now, is that just regular wood? Is that treated wood?
I don't know if this is regular or treated wood. Yeah.
That's regular wood.
It is regular wood. Thank you. Yeah.
I think we encourage them not to use treated wood, because if the life of the roof is going to be 40 years, whether it's treated or not, it's going to rot out at some point. And the anticipation is that the system becomes stabilized, and at some point you don't need the wood to be in its structural capacity as
and
it
also
once was.
Chemicals.
Yeah, we're concerned about.
After a while, and the lattice work is needed to retain the soil.
Well, we don't know the answer to that for sure, but there are other methods besides using wood to achieve this. So there are numerous methods for steep slopes that
can be built out of Trex too. We do with that.
right,
Plastic
use
wood
the
that's
plastic
not going to
wood
rot away.
and various other things. So there are a lot of ways to do this. This is just one example.
Mm-hmm.
We're not saying you should do this example.
The previous slide, was that just moss, the real steep roof?
No, that's a sedum roof in
Yeah.
Germany. It's planted, yeah.
What aspect is that, you know?
Michael Bryan with the Office of Sustainable Development took this photo, so
Because I know
you might know.
on some roofs, like on the north side, if it was automatic, you start getting moss growth or something because it's darker and wetter.
Or ferns, or, yeah. So some new buildings, so with new buildings you have slope and we might need to support that. And then there's also some existing buildings that don't have slope. And like Tom was talking about, ponding, this drain may be a little clogged, or this just might be a real flat spot here where you're getting quite a bit of sediment buildup and possible mosquito breeding, those kinds of things. So those are issues that you'll have to take care of when you're applying an Ecoroof on an existing building. You need to talk to the maintenance or whoever might be up there on a regular basis and understand where those flat spots are, because you should correct those to prevent ponding, because plant material will suffer if there's standing water for long periods of time on that Ecoroof. So if you just went and planted this, put soil and planted this, this might be a spot where you might have some problems. And just on this one, with the existing roof, is that this one has more than a 2% slope. You can see coming down this kind of a shed section on this roof. And I guess our statement is that if you can't adjust it, there might be a little bit of shade here and there. So if you have a south-facing aspect, then come next Wednesday, that's our marketing pitch, and find out what planting plan you can come up with that will survive in that south aspect. So just to give you a summary, this is a little graphic that we put together, and it's my little, I was interesting, Tom, I was just looking at this date. This is July of 2002 down at the bottom here. And I drew this graphic for Tom in 2002, and that was the first time I'd met Tom. And here I was, of course, drawing Ecoroof stuff for him. So we found this graphic and decided to put it back in here, and it's kind of a neat connection. So in general, here's your building roof drain. Here's maybe a little stairwell that pops up, or mechanical space, or something like that, HVAC equipment. And just in general, you can see that north is up. So if there was a parapet wall, you might have a little bit of shade in here. Oh, so we've got dry to moist, dry being the light green, medium, and then dark green being the moistest. So if you had a parapet wall, let's say 2 feet or so, you might get a real nice shade there, shade here. Then you might get a little bit more on that west edge, because that west heat is going to come through and along this here. And then as that water is draining across, you're going to pick up maybe a little bit more moisture down near the drain on this example. So I don't know if it'll radiate exactly like that, but it might look something like this. But in general, on top of that parapet or penthouse, it'll be hot, and then most of the field like that will be just generally the same moisture content. But that just gives you an idea of what you should be looking for when you're considering your planting design on an Ecoroof. Yeah, which we'll get into next week, right? So is that any questions on slope or aspect? You guys, in the back.
Do you have a handle on how the slope affects the stats you gave at the beginning, the 50% retention and the other peak load?
I think most of the roofs that we're monitoring right now are flat. And so we have good information on the flat roofs. And then as for, I guess some of the universities, I would say maybe OSU has, theirs are flat as well.
Penn State University has pitch slopes.
Some information on that. It's a good question, but yeah, we don't know what we have in Portland here. Yeah.
Are we factoring in wind at all? If it's up, doing a certain height, or are you necessarily affecting the soil?
We're not, when we're doing our monitoring and stuff like that, we just have what we have, and so we're not. It may be a factor, definitely, but as for whether it's in a windier area, maybe adjacent to the river versus a closed-in area, something like that, we don't know exactly. But I think it definitely could be a factor. Yeah. Yeah.
I was curious about that one building that you showed that had the south-facing building that
The
was
Buckman.
back, and what you did after it failed. Did they try to revegetate, or is it just?
It hasn't failed. It just went dry.
Okay, so we established.
Yeah, and so it's still up there, right? And the grasses then in the springtime will come up. They'll turn green, but so it's just The grasses that happen to be up there are just turning brown as that summer heat.
Died.
No, they'll come back.
Do
Yeah.
they mow them? Do they go? Or,
Do they?
Yeah, when it dries out in late May, early June, they mow it, and then they just leave it and then it goes. It usually goes to seed. So whether it's seeds or coming up from the roots, nobody knows. At any rate, then it just comes back every year and it greens up on its own. So it's
not being irrigated, obviously.
it's not being irrigated. no.
And was it irrigated to establish it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess if these die and come back, is my primary goal, if I'm looking at BES standpoint, is my primary goal to stop winter water more than summer water? So it's not necessary for me to irrigate this to keep it working?
Well, just on that particular example, there were grasses that were on that roof. And so there are some rooftops that have grasses, but also there's sedums are an evergreen, or some sedums are evergreen. And so those roofs will have vegetation on them throughout the year.
But even if the sedum dies off because I'm not irrigating, it will come back on its own?
No, it's not necessary to irrigate it, but there have been, when that plant dies off, I don't think it's going to come back. With the grasses, they will reseed, but sedum does move around here and there. But as for it, if it dies and goes away, it probably won't come back in the spring.
So is my main goal winter water, or is my main goal summer cooling, or is there some kind of trade-off here? What am I really trying to do? I mean, is it always worth watering it to get the summer cooling effect?
So it's not that you're trying to do one more than the other. You're trying to do it all. So the exact design that does it all best, we don't necessarily have that specific information. You have good questions, because what is the value of that roof as it relates to grass and its stormwater management and its habitat value and its insulation value? Those are questions we don't have the answers to yet. So kind of we can't really answer your question, but those are good questions. Because should we, when we look at biodiversity and things, we want more diversity of plant materials. But generally speaking, right now, what we'd like to share is information kind of in the context, when we were talking about this as we were putting this together, and it's hard to kind of get back to it, but we're trying to give you an alternative to conventional roofing. So you've got this membrane, that membrane, you've got this shingle, that shingle, you've got whatever it might be, and we would like to take Ecoroofs and take them out of being this fancy thing and have them being an alternative to roofing. So a lot of what we're going to give you is that sort of model. Now, it just turns out, because it's a living system, it can do so much more, but yet there are components of it that can be of greater or lesser performance depending on the season and the design and the plants. So to me, it's fascinating because it's so diverse and there's so much to learn. But generally, we want to give you this kind of basic alternative that, and if you're looking at aesthetics and things, it's very easy to make this look really nice and do lots of other things. In the science, it's really neat to hear people so interested in the science and how you get to that. So
What I'm trying to accomplish.
So our number one goal is stormwater management.
Okay.
But it's hard to say that everything else is, well, I guess I would say everything else is number two.
Well, everything else has an effect, or maybe has a cost and a savings. So if we just talk about that.
But you get one thing, you get so much for the same dollar. That's kind of, so anyway.
Anything else before we move on?